Hey there, I'm Sir Wade, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through a bunch of really cool animation workflows and techniques in Unreal Engine 5.8 specifically. Now, everything I'm about to do, you can follow along if you'd like. I'm going to put the project file download in the description down below. And this entire video, it's a bit longer than I usually make my videos because this is basically the recorded version of the lab that I gave at Unreal Fest 2026 in Chicago. This was a live lab where people had laptops all provided with these project files to follow along. So if you came to my lab, please say hi in the comments. And if you weren't at Unreal Fest or you didn't make it to my lab and you're seeing this for the first time, well, now you've not missed out. And I just want to throw out there that if you enjoy this video, if you enjoy these workflows, these demonstrations, and you want to go deeper, I'm going to put a link in the description below to my Unreal Engine 5 courses and professional training. One of the things I do is animation training specifically in Maya, Blender, and Unreal. And I have what I think is the most thorough and comprehensive training for professional and aspiring animators who want to bring their existing workflows or figure out how to best work inside of Unreal Engine. And the course link below is for 5.8, which is the newest version of the engine. It just came out as of the time of recording this video, and we're going to have 5.8 for a while. So if you've ever been thinking of learning Unreal Engine, this is the engine version to do it on, because you're not going to be left behind for a while, because we've got plenty of time to keep working with 5.8 before we go to Unreal Engine 6. And what's exciting is we have new rigs to play with. So all that to say that if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy my teaching style and learning animation workflows from somebody who is an animator and understands how these tools are meant to be used, then hopefully I'll see you in my actual courses. But if you're watching this around the time that I post this video, here's a discount code for you. Thank you. Let's dive in to this lab. In case it's your first time on my channel, my first name is actually Sir. Wade is a middle name, so I go by Sir professionally or Sir Wade online, and I am an animator and a professional trainer. And I've been doing this for a long time. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you through a tasting course of a bunch of different workflows that I think are really fun. Some of these things, if you're really in the Unreal Engine community, you may have seen before, and I'm hopefully going to go a bit deeper to explain some cool stuff that has been updated in 5.8 that makes our life a little bit easier. But some of these workflows are things that, as far as I can tell, have never been discussed in an Unreal Engine capacity, like no one's ever shown them before. Also, I'm going to have chapter markers in the video down below, so if you want to like jump ahead or come back later, it'll be easier to sort of jump around. So jumping into our first example, we are going to Spider-Versify our animation. Now, we're going to essentially turn our animation into stepped twos. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but we're going to do this non-destructively in a way that only Unreal can. So let me jump into Unreal. If you are following along, you're going to use the structure here is that in the content folder, Unreal Fest level sequences ready, that will have all of these level sequences ready for you to go to follow along. You can open them up and you can do the assignment that I built in for you here. If you want to see the finished example that I'm going to show you, you can go back out to the finished folder, and that's what I'm going to show you here. So that's the deal if you're following along. So basically, here's the trick. I'm going to show you how it used to work in 5.7 and previous versions of Unreal, and then I'm going to walk you through how to do it a new way in 5.8. So what you can do is you can take any animation. So what I have in this case is I have Manny here. He's got some animation data on him. It's a run cycle in place, as you can see, and that's just running as an animation sequence. But I also have a layered control rig sitting on top that is doing the, open this up here. There we go. That is doing just this like sort of head and torso turn to the side. So basically, run cycle is animation sequence, and then custom animation on a live control rig is happening on top, and that's giving me the turn. Now, what you had to do in the past is if you took this animation, basically this sequence called run anim, what you could do is you could set it up with a linked animation sequence so that anytime I made changes, tweaks to this animation, and I hit save, it would automatically basically rebake out this animation sequence called run linked, which I already made. And so what this does, this is just like the saved version of that animation. You can see it here applied to Quinn. She's running, and then she'll turn and do that animation. So this is just like the baked down version of this live animation. And so what you used to have to do, still cool, but more steps, is you would make a new level sequence. You would import the like linked animation, right? The exported version. You would put that on the character because you couldn't do this with a live control rig. It had to be fully baked down in an animation sequence. And what we would do is you would use a time warp curve baked on twos in stepped. And you can see here in the top left corner, we have that animation currently running in that stepped interpolation mode, in that Spider-Verse mode, as we're kind of used to it now. Now, I'm going to go through this and just show you how to do it now a better way, and I'll make it a little bit more obvious. So if you're like, I don't know if I'm seeing what I think you're about to see, like this will be a little bit more clear. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna open up the Ready Run Anim, and I'm gonna take this Manny right here, and there's no animation on him. So I'm just gonna go to the animation track, hit the plus button here, not this one, but this one, run. That is his in-place run cycle, which I will extend so that it, goes on for longer. Now, I'll go ahead and do the layered animation sequence here as well. So I will go to Manny, I will add a control rig, I will make it a layered control rig, and I'm gonna throw on CR Mannequin Body. That's gonna give me the ability to just, set a couple keys. Let me just go ahead and key everything. Makes it a little bit easier. I'll bookend it so I can just do something in the middle. After I bookend, I'm gonna turn his torso a little bit and turn the head just to kind of face that direction. And then I'm going to take those two controls right there. And I'm just going to use my curve editor to hold that pose. And if I wanted to, I could do a little bit more to, do extra curve stuff. But anyway, now he does that. Let me go ahead and extend this a bit and maybe pull this over a little bit extra. Right. So now he turns, he looks at the camera, and he goes back to running forward. So now, a little bit of animation. An animation sequence, layered control rig. I don't have to bake it down anywhere. I can do all of this here in this sequence. So what I'm going to do to get this or any animation to just instantly have that onto's effect non-destructively. That's the key. Because I could do this with layers. I could, modify the actual data here. I could bake all this down, and there's a number of ways to do it. But if I want to do this non-destructively in a way that keeps my animation fully editable with the keyframes that I prefer to work with, and just immediately just have it in this mode, all I need to do, as of 5.8, they've changed something about the evaluation in how level sequences work, and it's more powerful now. It doesn't get confused as often. So I can just add a time warp track. I'm going to use the time warp curve. And that is going to give me a linear flow of time. So if I were to, for example, set a key on this and then just copy paste this like that, what essentially is going to happen is that I'm keying the flow of time. Time is going to move, and then time is going to stop, and then it'll resume again. So you can see that it kind of becomes this like whoop, time stop, and then slow-mo ramp back into normal time, and then he has to speed up. Don't worry about that. This is time. That's what we're keying. So what I can do is I can select this, right-click, and go to Filter. By default, the first option is Bake, which I can bake on 2s, which is usually what we do for Spider-Verse, or I could say, give me 3s, so it's a little bit more apparent what I'm doing. I'll make it 4s. I'll make it 4s just so that if you're newer to animation, it'll be really easy to see what I'm doing. So that seems like it does nothing. That just set keys every 4 frames on time. But if I select this curve and hit 5 on my keyboard, it will set automatically to stepped keys. But to be visual, I'm going to say right click, and I'm going to say constant. Boop. Constant. Actually, I need to select all my keys to do this properly. So we'll select all the keys, right click, constant. There you go. And now, hopefully now you can see that I'm getting the animation very stuttery, right? It's very stop and go, and that's what I want. That's the point. So time is now jumping every 4 frames. And if I wanted to change this, I could just come back. Actually, I'll just hit undo a couple times to go back before. There we go. Go to that, grab these. This should be set to linear. There we go. And I'll just rebake it. I'll just say, all right, let me go ahead and do filter, bake, and I'll bake now on, let's bake it on 3s. Apply, select all the keys, right click, and constant. Again, I just use the hotkey 5 usually to just set them all. I'll just select this and hit 5, but I want you to see what I'm doing. So now it's a little bit less stuttery, but the same thing applies. So that will just apply on top of the animation, but I can also just mute this track. So you can see it's very smooth, and I can turn it back on, and now it's all stuttery, right? And so that is a very, very quick way to just, Spider-Versify our animation procedurally, I guess you could say procedurally, but instantly and non-destructively, because I can just turn it off at any given moment. I can keep animating. I have a live rig, animation sequence. It doesn't matter. It just works. You used to have it as an animation sequence and as a nested subsequence for it to work. But now you can do it all in one level sequence, which is very cool. And if you care, if you want to be really in-depth knowledge-wise, here's a bug for you. As of Unreal Engine 5.8.0, so the initial release version that just came out, this file that I'm currently using, I had built in 5.8 Preview, and there's a bug. You actually can't change these keyframe interpolation methods any other way. Like, I can't actually change these with my hotkeys, with this menu. Like, it doesn't work. You can see, like, I'm hitting auto, nothing's happening. It won't do it. The only way to do it is selecting them in here and right-clicking and then clicking it here, and then it'll do it. Popping in while editing just to clarify this one particular bug. This is happening because it's on a time warp curve specifically, and this is a known issue by Epic Games and already has been fixed internally. That fix will roll out in the next point release. So this is not a huge thing that you'll run into, but if you're doing exactly what I'm doing, you may encounter this. This is the workaround for it, and this will only be a temporary problem and will not last through the next update. So back to the video. I don't think I'll even put this in the video if you're seeing this. It's just because I felt like it was relevant. But anyway, this is the kind of in-depth stuff that if you're curious about these things, these are the things I teach in my class. I don't usually put this stuff in the YouTube videos. So anyways, that's our first example. Let's move on to the next. Next up, we're going to do constraints, and constraints in Unreal are super easy and super powerful because they're just so much simpler than they are in Maya. I personally don't mind constraints in Maya. Once you understand them, they're pretty straightforward, but you know, getting to that point is not always the easiest thing. So here is the sort of finished file in Unreal, or in this level sequence, and a little bouncy cube. So this is my example for you. We want to have this red cube just getting pushed around by all the little rectangles and eventually get skewered and does some independent animation. So if you want to see the finished version, again, that's in the finished folder, but I'm going to go ahead and open up the ready folder. File 2, Constraint Basics. So all you have to do constraints, we need to be in animation mode. So if you jumped ahead to get to this point, like if you're following the video normally, you'll probably already be in animation mode. But if you are jumping ahead in this YouTube video, you might have to take a step back and actually set yourself from selection mode to animation mode because you need this left panel to be here. So what you can do is open the Constrain tab, and we've got our constraints, which are dockable. They're probably floating around the window for you, but if you just go ahead and dock them, just like that, you can go to the Constraints tab, and you can pre-select parents if you want. You can be like, I'm going to want to constrain to this object, and you could say, that is where I'm going to constrain to. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to do it super manually so you can see. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to twirl down this cube in the, I'm gonna open up all the tracks here in the level sequence, you can see. So if I go into transform, you'll see we've got our location, rotation, scale. That's all we have. It's gonna change in a second. So I'm gonna go find the frame where my constraint begins. Let's call it frame 25, boop, where those two are gonna connect. So I'll select my cube. I'm going to add a constraint, a parent constraint specifically, and it says, what are we constraining to? So I select the cube, add the constraint, and then pick the object that I want to sort of drive the constraint relationship. That's cube 2. Now, right off the bat, you can see down here in the sequencer, we now have a new track called constraints. And if I twirl that open, you can see cube 2 now has a constraint relationship. And if I hit play, there it goes, right? And then obviously it's just that one, so the rest don't do anything yet. And that's what we're gonna do. However, a key difference between Unreal and Maya is you'll notice that if I scrub before frame 25, that object was still independent before I actually created the constraint. That's why I went to frame 25 first and created the constraint on this frame, because as of this frame, I want the constraint to start. If you're used to Maya constraints, you'll know that in Maya, when you create a constraint between two objects, that constraint gets created, but it gets created as if it had been there the whole time. So the first thing you always have to do is you make the constraint and then you key the constraint and then you go back a frame to turn off the constraint as if, you know, to make sure it wasn't working before that point. It's extra work and it makes sense. When you understand how my constraints work, it actually makes total sense and you'll be glad that it does that because the alternative is super weird. And anyways, I have a whole class on Maya for animators. If you're interested in like mastering Maya, it's probably not why you're here in this video, but if you are curious, I've linked to that down below as well. And I have a whole section on constraints. Similarly, I have that whole section of constraints for, you know, one-handed props, two-handed props, multi-character, full body stuff. I've got a ton of constraint examples in my actual Unreal class as well. So either way, if you want more information, that's there. But here, we're just going to jump ahead. What's nice is that I create the constraint on frame 25. It just kind of works on frame 25 and it moves forward. Now, I want to now move on to this next one. So what you could do is you could end the current constraint. Well, let me put it this way. If you're coming from a Maya mentality, if you're a Maya animator thinking about constraints and you're thinking, okay, what do I do next? You're probably thinking one of two things. Most likely, this is where you would like create a new locator and you'd set up a new constraint and you would have to turn off the old one and turn on the new one and sort of trade who's in charge of this red cube and manage those constraints to then take over from here. We don't have to do that. And then if you didn't do it that way, well, you'd probably want to use Xform or something from Animbot. There's a whole like mental process, right, at this point of like what you want to do. In Unreal, we don't have to do any of that. We could, sure, turn off the constraint. And the way we would do that is by saying, hey, active keyframe, let's go ahead and turn this off. Boop. And that will now turn off the constraint as of this frame. And obviously, we could create a new constraint and keep moving forward, which I'll go ahead and do. So I'll grab this object, and I will create a new constraint, parent constraint to this cube. As you can see, I basically have gone, you know, the no constraint to then a constraint here. And then I've now turned off the first one. I'm turning on the second one, and then off it goes. And we'll go with this for now over here. And then I'm going to try to get inside this cube so we can look for when this object starts to move. Because eventually it's going to start pushing up. Right? Right there. Boom. Frame 61. So right here on frame 61, that's where this starts to take over. So again, I could turn off the old constraint, turn on a new constraint. But you know what? Let's not worry about it. What I'm going to do is on frame 60, let's call it frame 60. On frame 60, I want to now link these objects so that on 61, when it starts moving, it just kind of pushes up with it. So, right? So I'm going to go to frame 60, and I want to create the constraint. Rather than turn it off, I'm just going to say, all right, you go down here. I'm going to have this cube. I'm going to add another parent constraint, and I'm going to add this cube 4 as the driver. Boop. And now you'll notice I now have two constraints active. In Maya, what this would mean is that now those two objects share. They both have the constraint, and so they're both kind of pulling, and so the new cube is going to get like half of the influence. That's not the case in Unreal. Whoop, there it goes, fully, no problem, right? It pushes it up, and if you're like, well, hold on a second, cube 3 is still an active constraint. What happens when I move it? Nothing. Nothing happens. Because in Unreal, the constraints are evaluated differently. They're evaluated in layer order, essentially. Because I have cube 3 and cube 4, both of these constraints active, it's the bottommost one, the most recent one at the bottom of the evaluation stack that actually gets to be in charge. And so I can just kind of stack the constraints, which now you get to see why this is so quick and easy when I continue on. So if I say, where does this object start moving? It doesn't help that you can't actually see the connection point. I can't tell when this moves. I'm going to go over here. There we go. I can see on frame. Oh, I guess you can kind of see it, actually, if I come over here. Yeah. So there, frame 81. Boop, is where it connects. So let's do it again. Take this object, add parent constraint, cube 5. Adds on there. Whoop. Keep it going, right? Go to frame 104. Take this object, add a parent constraint to that object, whoop, and so on. And we have more to do here. But the idea is that you can just kind of stack constraints on top of each other, and only the most recent, the bottom one in the stack, gets evaluated, so you don't have to manage them quite so much. But eventually, what I want to have happen is this object is going to, you know, be the one that object is eventually going to come in here and skewer it. Now, I don't actually want it to move. I want it to stay there, but I want it to pull it. So I'll just pick some frame over here and say, all right, I want the cube to at some point start following that thing, the cone, and start pulling it over here so that it gets skewered. and then it pulls, and then let's go ahead and just say on, I don't know, sure, this frame. This is where I want to turn off the constraint relationship. Well, what I could do is just turn them off. Turn off the most recent one, turn off the one before that, turn off, turn off, turn off. Don't hit the X. The X will remove the constraint and just delete it. So you want to use the active keyframe button to do it. And what you'll see down here is I just chopped off all the constraints. I guess let me undo that so you can actually see here for a second that if I go like this, if I turn off the bottommost one, boop, like that, well, it turns it off, right? So it turns it on when it goes on, it turns it off when it goes off, and it goes back to being whoever is the most recent above that. So cube 6 is now back in control, right? The ones before that still have no effect. And so that is how you can sort of relinquish control back to previous constraints, is by just toggling which ones are on and off after that point. And the other thing you'll notice is that it's doing what's called compensation keys. It's actually creating little tiny keys really deep in the time slider right there to transfer basically like local space to world space. It's converting the constrained transformation matrix data to the world space of just making sure that object stays put. So when you turn off the constraint, it doesn't snap back to wherever it was when you made the constraint, like Maya does by default. It does its little math thing in here to keep the object in place, which is very convenient for us. It does mean that you have to be a little bit more mindful if you start retiming stuff, you know, and you have to start managing keys. You do have to make sure you're grabbing both sets. Technically, it looks like you could use these handles. I wouldn't recommend using these handles. It'll break things at first if you start moving these handles around. And that is because the compensation keyframe data is now incorrect. And so what you would have to do is, there's different buttons in here for like compensate keys, and you can kind of go in and there's a way to fix it. Let's just not worry about it, because this also has another thing where you can go, and we call this the key eater bug. It just eats all your things. If you want to retime your constraints, just delete the keys. Don't use those little handles. That is something they're looking to fix in, I think, the next version of Unreal. But let me jump ahead to my finished version here so I can show you exactly what I did, right? So here I just have constrain, 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 constrain. I'm just stacking them up, and then eventually they all get turned off right here. Well, I guess I could point out when this cube gets skewered, I'm doing just like a little bit of animation to make it feel like it's actually getting stuck on the object. And that's just animation directly on the transformation values of this cube, right? So I go to my location and rotation keys. Oops, go like that. You can see that I just have keyframe data, because again, unlike Maya, I can animate this object directly despite it being directly constrained to other objects. I don't need to do locators or groups as sort of a proxy object in the middle. It's called a dynamic constraint. I can just constrain on I can just animate on top of the constraint, rather. So what that means is, you know, I go in here and I get to this frame and I get to wherever I want the, you know, the animation to stop being constrained. And that's here. I turn all the animation off, or all the constraints off. Boop, and then I just do my little squash and stretch, my little hang time, and my little cube bounce, right? So I don't have to think about locators and proxy objects, and I don't have to worry about, you know, managing all these keyframes and constraints. I just add constraints, turn them off when I don't need them anymore. I animate whenever I need to on the object I want to mess with. I don't have to think about it. And so that's the demo with this one, is just that constraints are very simplified and very animator friendly in Unreal. And they're very stable. They actually work really well. If you've used Unreal in previous versions and been like, constraints broke everything, there were reasons why that was, and most of those reasons have been addressed. Where the constraint data used to live, it was stored in the level, not the level sequence. That was a big reason why things would seem to break a lot if you didn't save both of those things. A lot of this stuff has been rethought, recoded from scratch, and it's really good. You can actually do a ton of stuff with the constraints in Unreal now, and it's great. So that's that demo. Moving on to number 3. This one's super fun. I've never seen anyone talk about this before, ever, actually. This is what we call pass-through keys, and the use case we're going to use here is to lift poses out of motion capture data, because you've got all this dense keyframe data, And sometimes you just want to take poses from it because you do want the head start of having motion capture and having all this motion and animation, but you don't actually want to go through the cleanup process and, you know, reverse engineering motion capture data. If you're going to have something more stylized, if you're going to be working with a more traditional keyframe animation workflow, you still want to use what's there, but you don't want to waste a lot of time dealing with all that's there. And so this is one of the more efficient methods to sort of do that. So I'll show you. I will start off with the finished example. There is this little animation I did for the Star Wars Day, May the 4th thing. And this was just like, you know, I stayed up for a couple hours that night, threw together some motion capture. I didn't clean it up. It's just raw data. It's, you know, it's fine. It's not the greatest. And then, you know, this guy gets grabbed and skewered and has some Ragdoll physics simulation over here. Now, this is just, you know, again, this was just XN's motion capture data that I had because I was borrowing the suit. And it's just raw data that I popped on the characters, did some retargeting. I had the prop tracker on the suit. And so this was just a little experiment for me. But I realized something, that if I had wanted to use this animation to do a more traditional workflow, I might want to grab some poses without having to actually clean all that up, especially with all the rotations and stuff. And so I will show you what this looks like. And so this is our goal here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a layer system where I essentially can just take my blocked poses of this animation. So I can just pull the poses directly from the motion capture data, but then I can animate this like a normal shot. You know, if I were not doing like a visual effects or live action workflow, if I wanted to go more stylized. So to do that, I'm going to jump to my ready folder. I'm going to go to layer poses ready. That's file number 3. And you can see that we're using animation layers to accomplish this. So I've already set it up for you. We have the animation data. This is, again, that XN's motion capture data retargeted from the XN skeleton, put onto a mannequin, and then baked onto a control rig. And so this first layer of animation, if I open the curve editor, this is all of the animation. It's kind of heavy. It's a frame, you know, it's a key on every frame, on every control across the entire character. That's a lot of data to deal with, and I don't really want to deal with it. So in the effort of being non-destructive, because I could come in here and start, you know, deleting stuff, but the whole point of this is that I have this and I may want to come back to it for some reason. I may want to use it for something later. So what I've done is I've taken every single control in the character, and I could be more selective, but I just grabbed everything. And I created a new animation layer underneath that first one. And normally we use animation layers in an additive way, where, you know, if I switch this to additive and then I, you know, like earlier, if I turn the character's head, it'll turn the head on top of all the other animation additively on top of what's already there. But I'm not doing that. I switched this to an override layer, which currently does nothing because it's turned off. The weight is at 0. If I turn the weight on, there's no keyframe animation, or there's no keyframe data on this pose. It just has whatever the first frame that I did this on. And so if I just set this to 1, you'll see that nothing happens. It essentially mutes the animation of the previous track because it says, override all the controls. But there's no data. Like, it doesn't, if I like move this, then that's just what this animation is. It just overrides everything. So we turn this off so that it's not doing its job. It's set to override, but it's not doing anything. It's just not working right now. If I turn it back on, it'll stop everything. So what we do is we use this button. This is a built-in feature to the animation layer system called a pass-through key. And if you read that little text tip, it'll say, you know, different versions of what key, depending on what version of layers we're in. Because we're in an override layer, this is a button for pass-through key. And you even have a hotkey that you can configure to do this automatically. Like, this is an intentional workflow. This is meant to happen. It's just not super well known. So what we can do is, let's just say that, you know, I want to have this first frame. Like, I really like that pose. Boop. Love that pose. I'm going to go ahead. I like that pose. Boop. Now again, nothing's going to happen right now. But you can see I'm getting keyframes. But maybe, you know what? Oh, I kind of want the anticipation, like this to that. Like maybe I want the anticipation before we get the arm extended. So I'm going to grab that too. Boop. And then, you know, maybe I want this hold like that. Boop. So now I've got that hold. And then I'm going to have the head come up. Boop. And so this could continue for a while, right? And then you say, oh, I want to have this as an anticipation. And then I want the swing, which looks like that. And then I want the follow through at the end of the swing, which maybe is like that. And so what I'm doing is I'm just going through methodically like I would with reference, and I'm just identifying what are the moments that I want to actually work with if I animate this manually. Now, when I'm ready, I can just say, turn on this layer. And what will happen is, I just realized I have the lower arm selected still from earlier, and so it only keyed the lower arm. So nothing's happening. So I need to deselect the lower arm, and then I can just jump from frame to frame going pass through key, pass through key, pass through key. Oh, when did I make a marker? Because you can see what happened is I only keyed the one that I had selected. I didn't realize I only had that selected. So let me just quickly go back through and boop. And I've got to keep the weight at 0 when I'm doing the keyframing. But when I'm done, when I'm ready to preview this and say, all right, show me my animation. If I just set this to 1 now, what I'm going to get is only the interpolation from pose to pose of the ones I set. And it's going to look like garbage. It's going to look terrible. But if I grab all these keys and hit 5, I can set them all to stepped, basically. And then I'm going to get stepped animation of just those poses that I identified. And so if I go back to my finished sequence and I go find 3 layer poses done, it'll be, you know, the poses I picked out before. You can see I've locked off that first layer, so I can't touch it. I have my second layer set to override, it's turned on, and so now I have the exact same animation, but I just have the poses I identified set to now blocking. So I've taken this whole motion capture clip and I've extracted from it a useful blocking pass of that same data that I can now apply a more traditional workflow to. So obviously, this is only good for certain use cases. Like you're not going to use this all the time. But when you have these long clips of mocap data and you're going to push them and you're going to sort of reanimate them, this is a super powerful workflow that's very easy to use and non-destructive because I can just go back to the old data at any point. It's still in there. And if you're like, but I'm not a layer person. I don't want to have to deal with layers. Like I don't want the baggage of base layer and anim layer 1. Like I don't want that. Well, that's fine too. I could duplicate and then strip some of the stuff out or whatever. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this anim layer 1 and say copy. I could drop in a new character rig, like a new copy of Manny. I could drop in a brand new copy of Manny with no baggage, nothing in there. And I could just paste the animation right on top of them. I guess I actually ended up with 2 layers. So I'll just delete one of those rigs. There we go. And I can put my layers away. I don't really need them anymore for this. Shrink this off to the side, get rid of my constraints. And I could just unload the other version of Manny. I now have a clean mannequin character with no layers, nothing else going on. Like I didn't have to do all that. Like that was actually even more work than it needed to be. But as far as being super non-destructive, like the original data is still there on the original character rig and all this stuff. But I now have just a regular mannequin with all my animation data just ready to go. So there are a number of ways that I could have done this in other techniques for this as well, but that is that workflow, and hopefully it serves you well. In this example, what we're about to do is we're going to take any animation, whether it's control rig, animation sequence, whatever, and we're going to have the feet automatically snap to surfaces, which is great. So if you've got like a hill or something and you don't want to have to fix the feet, this won't like solve all your problems, but this is going to be a huge time saver for certain workflows. So what I've got in my example here is I've got Quinn. Go ahead and do this. If I have a character who's just like running, right? I've got a run cycle that just goes through the floor. The character doesn't, respond to the ground. What we're going to do is just fix that. So the character actually will run up a slope and back down a slope. And what's crazy about this is that it's dynamic. Like I can move this around. Well, maybe with this object it's going to be a little bit tricky, but like you can see as I bump this around, it doesn't want to hold position. But you can see it's still working, right? I can move it all around, the character still, feet are still locked to it. which is great. And eventually she'll run away. So let me go ahead and show you how this works in our ready folder. So I'm going to go floor feet. 04 floor feet is the file we're looking for. We've got a character with nothing on her. So I'm going to go ahead and take Quinn, and I'm going to add some animation. If I add on the animation track MF run, we are going to get her run cycle. And you'll see that it just, does its thing. I'll loop it. Oops, if I could aim, I'll loop it. And just for speed, I'm just going to grab this character, set a key, come forward, and just whee. And then I'll take this key range and hit 4 to switch it to linear. That way it's not auto interpolation, it's just running. And that's, we'll see how good my eyeballing of this was. Actually, let's see if I can tell. I want to see if her feet slide too much. It's not bad. That's pretty good. I did a pretty good job. Her feet slide a little bit, but really not too shabby. Now this is super easy. We could do just one thing to make this work. And that is with these mannequin characters in particular, there's a built-in control rig to just handle this. Control rigs are the rigs in Unreal, right? If you're used to Maya or Blender or most other tools, your character asset consists, the model and the rig are very intrinsically linked. They are skinned, they are one asset. So your character rig is not really to be messed with because you'll break it and it won't work anymore. Unreal is not like that at all. Your model is one thing. Your skeleton is another thing. The rig on top of the skeleton is a very another thing after that. Like, these are very different assets. They can be swapped out and changed on the fly. It's kind of crazy. And a control rig is just, it's the rings. It's the stuff that we play with on the character. So our rig, which we don't currently have open because we have just an animation sequence. We just have animation data deforming the bones, right, on the bone level. We could add a rig. For example, I could do the thing where I say, hey, let's go ahead and add a control rig. Let's make it layered again. And let's do that thing where I can say, hey, add a CR mannequin body. And now I have a rig on top of this character that allows me to, as I did before, turn the head, for example. So I can have her turn her head and look off to the side, just like that. And I'll go ahead and, actually I'll copy this, paste it there, copy this, paste it there. And so now she'll turn her head and turn back, right? So that is one type of control rig, the kind that we're used to. But there's another kind of control rig built into the sample pack here that just comes with these characters. So if I say, yeah, you know what, let's add another control rig. I don't even need to make it layered. I'll just say add another control rig, CR_ground alignment. Boop. Now you'll see that her knee, or rather her hips and her feet are tracing to the floor. They're drawing a path. And so I just hit play, it just works. She just runs and does her thing. Look at that. Look how cool that is. And so whether it's an animation sequence, a control rig, set of animation data, whatever, we have a control rig for the ground alignment that is actually manipulating the Z position or the upward and downward position of the hips and the feet, the two IK things of the body. And it is offsetting the character based on the height of the floor, of the surface underneath. This can be broken fairly easily. Like, this control rig is not like foolproof. You can confuse it and you can push it beyond its boundaries. Like, if I push this up too high to where it's like, okay, well, that's above the character, right? We're drawing this down to the floor. So it's not gonna look upwards. So you can put it at a weird height to where you can break stuff like that. And so if you have the character step off of a ledge or something, you'll see that it'll get confused and funky. But that's more a matter of the character expects to be here at their source than anything else. So if you were to raise this, this is sort of what it's looking at, right? So you have a little bit of logic happening. So if I move this up in the air, then it's it doesn't know how to calculate it. So you can confuse it, but just don't do that. Just, keep it working the way it's designed to work. Or if you need something really specific, then go build your own control rig. The whole point of these being included is that you can go find this ground alignment control rig, which lives over here somewhere. Give me a second to find it. I put it in this folder. You can go, dig into this if you know what you're doing, or if you have somebody on your team who does. There's no construction event because we don't need a construction event for this, but we have our forward solve. This is the nodes. Don't freak out. Nodes are your friend. And if you are intimidated by this, then you probably don't need to worry about it. But hey, what you should know is this is not a lot of nodes. Like, this is not that much stuff. And anyway, all that to say, if you need something more custom, you could build something more custom. But that's that. That's our one click, I think it's literally like 2 or 3 click solution to have the feet match the floor. And if you have custom characters, my recommendation is do it with a mannequin and retarget it to another character, because that control rig probably won't work on your custom character unless you have things set up just so. On to deformers, the cartoony stuff. Very fun. These are great. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up number 5, deformers done, to show you the finished product once again. These are deformers. Now, there are all kinds of deformers in Unreal. There's a lot of really cool stuff, but in our case, I'm just gonna show you a sculpt deformer. So I'm gonna take Vlad here. That's the name of this stick. And I'm gonna impale our mannequin character. Poor guy. What did he do to deserve this treatment? Well, that is a GPU deformer. It's fast, it runs on your graphics card. And so this is a super, super lightweight operation, and this will work on metahumans. Like, if you wanna Tom and Jerry pancake flat in the face with a frying pan, you can do it with a really realistic character. This is not a heavy thing to do. And so what I have here is I have a sculpt deformer with a bunch of settings tweaked, constrained to Vlad here. That's giving us this effect. And I could change the fall off and the way it's like doing all this, but that's just my way of doing it. Now, if I may, I'd like to show you the worst thing you've seen all day. I'd like to show you something extremely cursed. And that is that you can give Manny a nose. Because a sculpt deformer can technically be used to sculpt geometry. I wouldn't recommend it, because you could give him eyes, and now he can see what he looks like, and all he needs left is a mouth to scream, because why does he look like this? He does not know. This is probably the most heinous thing that has ever happened to this character. But he's very unhappy about being impaled. Anyways, the point is, you can do some pretty interesting things. It's obviously not meant to be used like this, but hey, having some fun with it at his expense. So if I go into the ready folder and open up a deformer, you'll see that I've prepared this for you, that you do have access to Vlad if you'd like to do a constraint yourself. I've showed you that in the second example, but the actual deformer just lives here. The sculpt deformer just floats in front of him. So if you want to play with this, here's how it works. There are 3 components to a sculpt deformer. The actual deformer object, which I could place on his head, which I could aim a little bit better like this, and just crown him king. Then we have our handle, and that's the thing that actually controls the sculpt deformer, right? And if you don't like the way it works, the 2 things you should keep in mind are that, number 1, the direction matters. First thing is there. The second thing is that all the settings are in the sculpt deformer. If I open my anim details here, I can show you the fall off, right? We can change things like the fall off. We can change things off the side fall off, which is sort of the external bound beyond the ring. And that'll change like the sharpness of this effect. And then we have our side multiplier, which also affects sort of how that math happens. Aim mode is about rotation, and then the weight is whether or not this is even turned on. So that if you turn it off, it can like lie in wait until you want to trigger it, and then you can go on, and there it goes. And so sculpt deformer, super fun, super powerful. You can also, squash and stretch this, do all kinds of things. But the third component of a sculpt deformer is a mask, and that is here. Mask, bone picker via space switch. I'm not going to cover that now because this video is already getting long, and I've this lab was supposed to have been delivered in 45 to 50 minutes, and I'm taking a little bit longer to do it for this YouTube video because I'm giving you a little bit more information as I'm at a more relaxed pace, because I don't actually have a room of 70 people who have something else to get to after this lab. But you still have a life to live, so I can't take up all your time. So we're gonna move on. But again, if you're like, wait, I want more, tell me more about cartoony things and other deformers and sculpt utilities, and there's so much cool stuff. That's in my class because there's just not time to cover it in a YouTube video. But the third thing is that you can mask out bones. You can tell it like, hey, like I only want this deformer to like affect up to the neck. I don't want to impact the shoulders and rest of the torso. So that's the masking. Anyways, that's there for you to play with. Let's keep going. Now the physics example here, I actually have sort of two things to say. Number one is that as of 5.8, we now have a much easier way to interact with physics control rigs, where you can actually have physics built into your rigs to like pose with and do all kinds of cool stuff with. And you can have full Ragdoll now in the sequencer. You can do this just right there in the level sequences. You don't need to do anything fancy with it. I do want to call out that if you're in a version before 5.8, I did a tutorial for the NVIDIA Studio YouTube channel, and that has a really fun sort of like wipeout example here. That has a really cool example on how to do the Ragdoll physics for your characters using Pi, which is the plan editor game mode kind of thing that Unreal has. That's a fun workflow. You should check that out. I'm gonna put a link to that video in the description below if you wanna check that out as well. I put a lot of work into it. But in 5.8, there's a new way to do it. An entirely different workflow that you can take advantage of that I'm not gonna cover in super depth in this video because, again, that would be another 50 minutes just for that. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm going to show you how you Well, I'm going to show you two things. I'm going to show you like a light overview of a different way to do some physics stuff while also giving you access to a new control rig. So if you downloaded the file, basically what I'm going to give you here is if you go to Ready Physics Rig, there's something for you to play with. I have in here mannequin character, Manny, just chilling. He's doing a run. And in this, you'll see that there's a little bit of this like wiggly offset to the character when you play and pause, and that's because there's physics running. If I take this cube, he's actually got a physics rig. And so I've included in this downloadable project file like a physics rig. This is not built into the character by default. You have to make one of these. So I made a really basic one for you so you can just kind of play with it. And, you know, so you can just kind of play with this a little bit. The other thing you can do is you can just grab the character global control, and you can see what happens when you just change the height. So if I push this into the ground, you'll get a little squat run, things like this. So, you know, play with it, tweak the settings. Settings all live up here. You can do quite a bit of stuff, but I'm going to have to do a different video on this topic because this is like its whole other thing. This is just here so you can experience the new features, but I'm also going to show you how you used to do a really interesting trick. And that is that you could sort of record Ragdoll physics stuff to create custom Ragdoll effects. You don't have to do this anymore, but I'm just going to show it to you because it won't really be relevant after this version. So what I did is I animated this orange mannequin character for his little like lightsaber thing. But you'll notice that he stops moving after a certain point. I just animated a few keyframes, and then he gets thrown, and I only animated a few frames to establish velocity, to give him some momentum, and then he stops moving. And what I did with this is this character has rigid body physics collisions like created for him in the game animation sample pack. So what I did to accomplish this, to give him the actual like collisions on the floor based on my animation, is I took this animation sequence, baked it out as an animation sequence, and if you specifically use the game animation sample pack of the character, you will find that there's a physics asset for this character. So if I open this character in the physics asset, you can see that he's got some little collisions. And I can hit simulate, and he'll go to Ragdoll mode, right? But the thing is that you could use this little simulate thing to trick Unreal into giving us animation authoring tools. So what I can do is I can go to preview animation, and I can use the animation sequence that I animated. So you can see that in the timeline, eventually he gets pulled and he gets dropped. If I can find the play button, there it is right there. Whee! And you can see that at any point I could take this character and I could hit simulate, bloop, and it'll activate the physics system. But what's really cool is if I hit this record button, I can actually start recording the animation playback like that. So now it's recording, I can hit go, and I just have to hit simulate at the right time. So I'm just gonna wait for the right moment, And I'm going to try and time it. Oh, I missed. I went too early. So let me try that again. Ah, I missed again. Ah, I missed again. You can see that you do have to be a little bit precise with it, but it's not that hard. Ah, I missed. I say it's not that hard, then I can't do it. There he is. I got him. He got all the way over here. So then I just swap out the animation here in the sequencer. And like that's a trick, is you can basically use the physics asset simulation preview mode in conjunction with like recording a level sequence in that editor to create an animation sequence that now I could take that animation data and I could bake it to a control rig, and then I could do custom animation on top of the physics. So if you are in a version of Unreal that's earlier, you can do this like, I think you can do this. I mean, I think you can do this back through any version of Unreal 5 that you've got control rigs and stuff. Like that shouldn't be something that you can't do at any point. But as a 5.8, you don't have to do this because now we have physics control rigs. So if you have a physics control rig like built for your character, you can just do that. But if you don't, you can still take advantage of this if you set up basic rigid bodies for your characters, or if you can take advantage of retargeting between assets that do have it. So hopefully you're still with me after all that. That's a kind of weird one, but that's just one I wanted to show because it's kind of there's a lot of weird stuff you can do there, and I don't think people show that very often. Last up, we're gonna do mouse mocap. One of my favorite easy demos, a fun feature. This is something you can do in Blender, but you can't do it in Maya, and you can happily do it in Unreal. So let me go ahead and show you what we are about to do. On top of showing you mouse mocap, I'm also going to show you how to trigger effects, because I love effects. You love effects, we all love effects, and you should see how to mess with them in the sequencer. So here I've got this animation. Kaboom. Oops, let me go ahead and do that again where it loads properly. And kaboom. There we go. So mouse mocap, it's very easy to do, and I will demonstrate for you here. So if I go to my ready file, this is our last file, 07 mouse mocap. The trick is, you can do this with any control rig. So you have to have a control rig. You can't do it just like a cube or something, unless it is a cube control rig. But you take any control. I guess let me put it this way. Step 1, open a control rig. Have it ready to go. Step 2, make sure we have auto key turned on, which we should by default here in my sequence I already made for you, but that's this button. I also recommend with auto key to set a first key on your objects, which I have already done for you as well. But then step 3 is just grab an object, any control, right? You can like one at a time, but grab any control. I'll grab the big heavy thing here and just press and hold on to it. What you're going to do now while you're holding on to it is you need to hit play in the editor. Now, if you hit spacebar and nothing happens, because space is usually your hotkey to play and pause, there are two hotkeys. There's a hotkey space and there's a hotkey shift space, depending on how you have your editor set up. Usually like your sequencer, your timeline is space, and then your viewport is shift space. So if you hit space and nothing happens, try shift space. So if I grab onto this, I'm still holding onto it, auto keys on, shift space, whoop, right? That's sound effects are very important. If I don't like it, by the way, I can just hit undo, and then we didn't even get to see it. If I hit undo, goes away. Try again, press and hold on to it, shift space, and right? And now hands-free. It captures your motions as keyframes. It just grabs it for you. That's why we call it mouse mocap, because you can use your mouse to sort of capture the timing of stuff. Very handy, fun for blocking, just like a lot of fun to play with in general. But you could then go through and clean that up, obviously, but then you could also go and do this for different channels, rotations, scales, transforms in different axes. You could do it, all at once or in little pieces, and then you can tweak. Now, I do recommend one thing if you're going to play with this, though, is because of how Unreal works, there's a good chance that a lot of this keyframe data is not on whole frames. So what I want to do is grab this object and show you that if I zoom in really close, there's a good chance. Oh, yeah, no, there it is. Yeah, there's a good chance that right here, for example, this white line is frame 29, and then here we are on frame 30. check that out. These keys are not actually where they're supposed to be. A lot of these keys are in like subframes. So just right off the bat, so what we're going to do is we're just going to grab all of our keyframe data, or maybe we just select over here, grab everything. And the hotkey is Control H. I'm just going to go Smart Snap. Boop. And that will snap everything to whole frames. And it does it in a really smart way, actually. It's a special feature Unreal has where it resamples the curve through the whole frame data rather than just like putting, what it does is it inserts keys on the whole frames and then it deletes the frames, the keys that are off those frames. So it's a very good way of actually resampling the curve the way you'd want it. It's not doing what Maya does where it like shifts keys because that can cause conflicts, and Unreal it used to create keys on top of each other. Whatever, don't worry about it. That's for another video. But Smart Snap, you do your mouse mocap, you do Smart Snap, now you can clean up and you'll be happy. And so that is a super quick way to block out some timing or just, you know, try stuff because it's so fast and so easy. But then if you are doing something with this character and you want to have an explosion, I'm going to show you how to do that. So I have a little folder here for my effects, and I've got a Niagara system and a cascade system, which will eventually be deprecated. But I just wanted to point out that if you want to trigger effects, this is me also promoting my cinematics class. I have not only an animation class in the description down below, I also have a cinematics class linked in the description. And so when you are trying to have things like explosions happening for cinematics, one of the things I like to show is how to actually trigger those because it's not always super apparent. So in my case, I'm using the mechanical damage effects pack on FAB and the realistic starter VFX pack on FAB. So if I take, for example, a mechanical effects and I go find my effects folder and I take this impact debris large and I'm going to pop this into my sequencer. All right, so that'll spawn in. So here I have this explosion and I need to turn it on. How do I make it work on the timeline? When you add this to your sequencer, typically it's not super intuitive, like how you turn it on. And so I wanted to show you. If you're using a Niagara system and you hit this little plus button to add a track, you won't see much. You'll see a couple things that really won't help you. You might be like, oh, is it an event trigger? No, it is not. That is a different type of trigger keyframe. Don't do that. You need to hit the plus button. You need to actually add the Niagara component, and that will allow you to then, in that track, access all of the stuff that Niagara has to offer. And very simple from here, you just want to add an effects system toggle track. That is what will allow you to either activate or deactivate or trigger your various types of systems. This one is meant to be like a detonation. So a trigger keyframe works great because you can just add keyframes and trigger the effect like that. So now I can just have it go boom, 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 right? Some systems are meant to run continuously. So you would activate them and then you would deactivate them. So it's like just change it to the type that you need here. However, if I delete this, there are other systems, there are other effects in FAB that if you download, for example, particle system, explosion, this cascade system. If I take this and push it here for you. A cascade system doesn't need the Niagara component. It's built in a different system. And here you can just find effects system toggle track. So if you just turn that on, switch it to trigger, it's the same thing, like that. But I want to point out the difference because if you downloaded something from the marketplace, a cascade system is pretty easy to find the button for it. But if you're using a Niagara system, which are the better systems typically, they require the extra step. And that can be, you know, you just might not know where to look if you haven't done this before. So I want to show you that. And you can still scale these. So if you're like, I want a bigger explosion, you absolutely can just scale that up, which is probably, yeah, here you can see in the scale, it's now 5 times the size. Kaboom. This one is not as fancy though. You can see these like sprites of the rock fall through the floor. They're not actual geometry, they're just cards. Whereas this one over here, the Niagara system, is actually spawning geometry. Like that. And so, anyways, that is our mouse mocap plus effects, which is a fun little demo that I really like to show. And that concludes our demonstration. As I've said a billion times, I have classes for this. If you want to go deeper, animation, cinematics, I got you. Promo code in the description if you're watching this before the class is actually complete. Feel free to jump in. If you're seeing this after the fact, you can still go buy the classes and you'll get the recordings of everything that I cover. It'll all be there for you. But the discount code is if you're watching this video around the time that I'm actually running the classes. So check that out in the notes below. And thank you so much for watching this video. This was a long one. And so if you got something out of this, please let me know in the comments below, like what was your favorite demo, or if there was something in this that you found particularly helpful, or if you have any additional questions based on what I showed or other stuff you'd want to see. I'm going to be posting a lot more Unreal Engine animation videos as well as Maya and Blender content. So get those requests in down below. And again, a huge thanks to those of you who actually came to my lab at Unreal Fest. That was super cool. And I will hopefully see you next year. If I do another talk or another lab, I'll let you know. But happy animating. And as always, I'm Sir Wade. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.